So I'm Michael Taylor. I am the Artistic Director and Chief Curator here at the Great Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. And it gives me tremendous pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event. This is the Mary Ann Frable Lecture, and we present it annually by a distinguished scholar to foster the study and appreciation of ancient art. The late Dr. Mary Ann Frable, together with her husband, Dr. Jack Frable, who's with us tonight, are among VMFA's most dedicated supporters, and their generosity has touched every facet of the museum, including our upcoming expansion and the recent renovation of the Leslie Cheek Theater. And doesn't it look great? The couple's impact on ancient art at VMFA is especially noteworthy. In 2007, they endowed a curatorial position in ancient art and subsequently established the Frable Fund for Ancient Art, which supports acquisitions and this annual lecture. So now for tonight's speaker, Dr. Margaret Laird, known affectionately as Peg, is an associate professor of Latin and classics at the University of Delaware. Peg received her MA and PhD from Princeton University and teaches Latin and Roman archaeology in the Department of Languages, Literature, and Cultures at the University of Delaware. She's the author of the acclaimed 2015 publication Civic Monuments and the Augustales in Roman Italy, and other works that investigate the ways in which ordinary Romans used monuments, sculptures, and inscriptions to commemorate civic donors, express community identity, and create urban landmarks in Roman towns. Her research has been supported by grants from the Center for the Advanced Study in the Visual Arts, the Getty Foundation, and the American Academy in Rome, among many others. She is the editor of the scholarly journal, The Memoirs of the American Academy in Rome, and is an academic trustee of the Archaeological Institute of America. Dr. Laird has excavated in Italy and Cyprus and served as the guest curator for the 2008 exhibition Roman Art from the Louvre at the Seattle Art Museum. Her lecture tonight draws upon her current research, which explores how, where, and why non-professional artists created pictorial graffiti and drawings of women on the walls of Pompeii. What a great subject. We are in for a treat. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Margaret Peg Laird to the podium.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I just have to say it's such a pleasure to be here with you all tonight. I have family and friends in Richmond and in Charlottesville, and I love this museum and its fantastic collection, so it's my real honor to be giving this lecture here tonight. And I want to echo Michael's thanks to Dr. Frable for endowing this lecture and for everybody else who's helped make it possible. It's great to see support and fostering of a love for ancient art history, and also to provide an opportunity for scholars to share their new work, which I'm going to be doing with you this evening. So, before I get started, just a slight word of warning. So I'm going to be talking about ancient graffiti, and kind of like contemporary graffiti, sometimes it can be a little bit explicit. Now, I've done my best to tone it down, but I still just want to, let everybody know. Yes. So tonight, my lecture is going to be divided into 3 sections. First, I'm going to introduce you to Pompeii and its wall inscriptions. Then I'm going to turn to look specifically at drawings made on walls, drawings of women made on walls, and think about how they were made, how they compare to drawings of men, and ways that they are unique. And then I'm going to look at these drawings in their original context, or several of them in their original context, to hopefully show you how interesting and unique they actually are. So, here we go. So tonight we're going to be spending most of our time in Pompeii, or all of our time in Pompeii, which is just south of Rome, about 150 miles south of Rome on the eastern side of the Bay of Naples. Pompeii was founded in the 8th century BCE, and in the early 1st century BCE, it came under control of the Romans. And at the time of its destruction, the city covered about 170 acres and had an estimated population of about 15,000 people, give or take. And here you see it. Of course, Pompeii is primarily known for its tragic demise. In 79 AD, over the course of 2 days, the city was obliterated by a major eruption of Mount Vesuvius. This covers the town in about 9 feet of volcanic material and pyroclastic flow. And following the disaster, the site was not reoccupied. It was rediscovered in 1748. And at that point, the archaeology was, I think we can call it limited. It wasn't particularly scientific. And the priority of these early excavators was to uncover as many buildings as possible and find the wall paintings and the sculptures that they contained. So consequently, they overlooked a great deal of archaeological material, and it has not been recorded and is lost. And these early methods of excavation really have impacted what we know about ancient drawings and ancient wall inscriptions and the way that we study them. So after its initial discovery, Pompeii has been excavated. Excavations have been ongoing for the last several centuries in various phases. About 3/4 of the town has been uncovered. Roughly 15,000 buildings have been exposed to the open air. And as I'm sure most of you know, Pompeii is, there are current excavations ongoing today, probably not as we speak because they're asleep, but I'm sure you saw the news last week of a major new wall painting cycle that was just uncovered recently. So these new excavations give us a pretty good idea of the amazing preservation and the kinds of things we can find at a site like Pompeii, what's been preserved. So we're looking at a hot food stall, a thermopolium, hot food shop, and we can see that preserved is a great deal of architecture, including the banquette or the countertop for the hot food stall, hot food stand, and you can see immured in it a series of vessels for holding hot and cold food and drink, which is really delicious. This banquette has been decorated with wall paintings showing animals, still lives, and mythological characters. You can see that they've found objects that are used for the preparation and storage of food. There were two human bodies found in the shop, as well as that of a dog. And these bodies can be analyzed for their DNA, and that sheds light on the demographics of Pompeii and the kinds of pathologies that people had at the site who lived there. And also, archaeologists have been able to analyze the contents of these vessels that were in, that contained the food that was being sold, so we know what kinds of things people were eating. So you can see that as archaeology is advanced as a science, the kinds of information we can get from Pompeii has also increased. Now, one of the things that you can't see so obviously with the naked eye, or at least in this image, is something that I think is particularly exciting about Pompeii, and that is wall inscriptions. Wall inscriptions. So written right here over top of this image of of a guard dog, a painted guard dog, is a message from somebody who did not like a guy named Nicias. All right. So this is just one of over 11,000 wall inscriptions that have been found at the site. Most of these wall inscriptions are textual, like this one. And the subject matter that they record are really wide-ranging. Some of them are very official, such as campaign notices or advertisements, announcements for games. Others of them are more informal, like the invective we see here, but we also find names and greetings and notes passed back and forth between people. We find love letters. We find tally marks where people are keeping track of things, maybe money or maybe objects. We find grocery lists. We even find quotations of poetry. So there are a really incredible amount and variety of inscriptions, of textual inscriptions. Much more rare are drawings, figural wall inscriptions. There are about a little bit over 1,000 wall inscriptions or drawings that survive from Pompeii. And I'm showing you a variety that gives you a sense of the range of subjects. So unsurprisingly, sports figures like gladiators and beast hunters are particularly popular. But we also find ships being drawn an awful lot. Human figures, mortal humans, divine gods and goddesses who had the form had human form, animals and plants and so forth. Some of it is very similar to contemporary graffiti in showing sexual organs, but for the Romans, they may have had more of a good luck or apotropaic valence. We see people playing around with images and words. It was people particularly enjoyed turning their name into the shape of a ship. So this man, Venustus, here wrote his name to make it look like a ship that was under sail and being rowed. And then we also find just geometric patterns and doodles and so forth. So there's a real wide variety. Very few of these drawings were signed, so we don't know the gender or the social status of most of their makers. It's clear, as you can see on the left, that some of them were made by the youngest children because they bear the hallmarks of the cognitive stages of children between the ages of 3 and 5. These are called tadpole figures, and I'm sure some of you probably have these on your refrigerator made by family members of yours. So this is ancient refrigerator art. But you can see the two other drawings demonstrate that there's a real variety of competencies. Some of the other drawings are less sure, maybe a little bit rougher and more naive, we might say, and then others are quite accomplished and show a master an expert in control of their medium. So we can't say that a drawing like this is necessarily done by a child because studies have actually been done that show that after about age 8, you cannot tell the difference between a drawing that's done by a child and one that's done by an adult who hasn't had formal art education or who doesn't draw regularly. So I think we should just say that there's a wide variety of competencies and that anybody who wanted to draw, who wanted to represent something visually, express something visually, and had an implement and was able to make a drawing could be doing it. Now, the thing that I think we also have to keep in mind is that these are drawings that are made not by professional artists being commissioned or paid by somebody else, but they are made by individuals who wanted to communicate something. And the way that they chose to communicate it is by picking up a drawing implement and making a drawing. So the implements they use, there are a couple of different techniques. One of them is to take a sharp implement like this stylus that you see, this metal stylus, or you could use a pin or a knife or maybe even a pointed rock or something, and to scratch an image or a text into the wall. And you can see in the example behind me that oftentimes these images will be scratched into a wall that's painted with a darker color on top. And as you scratch through that outer layer of paint, the lines of the drawing emerge as white or light as a contrasting color. Now, these incised drawings and texts actually give us our contemporary word graffiti, because Italian archaeologists looking at these types of images and scratched text described them as graffite, which means scratched, literally. And then over time, graffiti came to describe any kind of writing or image on the wall. It's kind of a fun fact for the evening. The other ways that you can make these drawings and these texts, you can apply pigment using either a brush and paint, or you can use something like charcoal or an earth, like a chalk type of material, an earth pigment, to apply the color onto the surface of the wall. And because these drawings are applied as opposed to scratched into the actual surface, they're very, very fragile, and very few of them actually still survive. They're very susceptible to damage, and they deteriorate very easily. This charcoal graffito, actually, this charcoal drawing, was just recently discovered in the last year. So most of these drawings and most of the texts as well, are very small. Some of the texts are only about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch high. But the drawings, you can see, they really vary in size. And what I've done here is I have superimposed at scale drawings in the locations where they're found. So over here we see 2 pairs of gladiators. The fighters are about 3 inches tall. In the center of this wall, and behind me is the largest wall drawing from Pompeii. It's a drawing of a ship that's about 3 feet tall, a little bit more than 3 feet tall, and it must have taken several people a considerable amount of time to make. And you can see in both of these cases, these drawings are placed in the center of the wall, kind of out in public. And it's likely that they were kind of functioning as part of the official decoration or the formal decoration of these spaces. We also find less formal drawings and texts, and oftentimes they'll cluster. So in the back of this house, here, there's a garden area that has a covered walkway around it, a peristyle, and there's a wall here in between a doorway into a dining room and one into a day room. And the owners of this house placed in the center of this wall this black piece of obsidian, which is a very shiny volcanic rock. It takes a wonderful sheen, and this would have been a luxury item. It would have been reflective and very unusual. It's kind of like hanging an antique mirror in your hallway, and people go, ooh, gosh, that's really beautiful, right? So this is what's going on there. So this piece of obsidian became sort of the focal point for a whole group of texts and drawings, one of which is a woman named Fortunata, placed right over top of this reflective mirror, obsidian mirror. We have to imagine that you're taking your friend, you're having your friend come over for dinner, you take them past into the garden, you're getting ready to go into your dining hall, they say, oh my goodness, what a beautiful mirror, and all around they're seeing all of this graffiti, which I can tell you most of it is pretty spicy, so So all of this suggests that Romans were not, or did not have the same kinds of negative connotations towards graffiti that some of us may have today. I think sometimes graffiti is seen as an eyesore or an act of vandalism or something that somehow violates the social contract. But in the ancient Roman world, graffiti could be part of the formal decoration, but it also could just be just out there and people were living with it. So it's kind of a different situation. Okay, so historically, wall inscriptions, and particularly textual wall inscriptions, have been completely overlooked by scholars. But in the last decade or so, work led by a wonderful colleague of mine named Rebecca Benefiel, who actually teaches at Washington and Lee here in Virginia, has shown that graffiti is an incredible source of information for ordinary people in the ancient Roman world. So these are the people who were not writing the official histories. These are people who were not the emperors. They were not even probably the elites of their town. But we find out from graffiti texts, their names, who they liked, where they lived, where they worked, what they wanted to write about, whether it was sort of highbrow or lowbrow. So wall inscriptions have become this incredible source of new knowledge for the ancient world. But wall drawings they didn't get brought along in quite the same way, primarily because to many art historians, they appear to be crude and simple. But I'm here to hopefully convince you that they are an incredible source of knowledge for the ancient world, a very, very unique and special kind of knowledge of evidence. So basically, not only do they tell us where people are drawing and what they wanted to draw, but they also record what we can call visual thinking, and that is a person's externalization, graphic externalization of thoughts and things that they were trying to express. They are evidence of social practices, too. They tell us where people were making drawings, how they used drawings to express themselves, to communicate, even to play in some ways. They provide evidence for the ancient mind's eye, how people perceived of the world and expressed it. And they also give us insight into the ancient imagination, which is very, very rare. And this is the ancient imagination not of the elite, but of just the every person. So while drawings are a very unique form of evidence, they also have some very unique challenges, mostly due to the way that they were studied and the types of preservation that we can expect. So in the best cases, like we see here, we have the wall, we have the drawing on the wall, it still exists. If you go to the Stabian Baths today, you can look and you can see this drawing right there. It's wonderful. You can take a photograph of it. You can draw a line drawing from it, which is called an apograph. And if it's copied from a contemporary photograph, those apographs can be extremely accurate, right? This is the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is that you have a wall that looks like this. We know that this wall originally was plastered. And we know from an early excavation report from 1916 that it had 2 election campaign notices on it, one of which asked you to vote for a guy named Caius Secundus. And we know that at the end of this painted notice that there is a hasty sketch of a few lines showing a man named Augustales. Okay. So let's study this. Well, we're actually very fortunate in this case because we have some other archival sources for this particular drawing. So it shows up in the field notebooks of Pompeii for 1915. It was photographed in 1917, which is incredible. And then it appears in this compendium of Latin inscriptions from Pompeii called the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum. Right? So this is really great. We have the best case is that we have a photograph of this. But for many, many, many drawings, all we have is the description. Drawing of a female head facing forward, figure of a gladiator, figure of two gladiators, figure of a ship, right? So we're limited. There are other drawings that are only known through epigraphs. So they only appear in sources like this where they've been copied by somebody else. And you can see from these two examples that these epigraphs are not necessarily very accurate. So we have to, take things with a grain of salt and turn over as many stones as possible. But we have enough evidence, for sure we have enough evidence, to be able to use this material and to study it. It definitely repays the effort to work with it. Okay, so now we're going to turn to look at drawings of women in particular. Okay, so we have 196 drawings from Pompeii that show mortal men and women and gods and goddesses who are shown in human form, right? I am excluding from this list genre figures like gladiators, hunters, sailors, things like that, characters who would automatically be male, okay? Out of 196 human figures, 20 of them are women. Only 20, mortal and immortal. Some of them we can identify by their names, like Fortunata, we've already met her, Hyria, Nigra, a woman named Sagania, and another woman named Volacena. Some of these are identified because they look feminine, and we have to take that with a grain of salt because that can be very subjective, like these two figures down here. For gods and for the goddesses and the mythological characters, they oftentimes will have the typical traits that we see or the typical attributes that we see in other media. So, for instance, Minerva, who is the Roman version of Athena, wears a helmet and an aegis, and Medusa faces forward and has snaky hair. So of these women, drawings of women, 9 of them survive in situ or were photographed, so we know what they actually look like, and we can study them. 6 of them are known only through epigraphs, that is, the drawings, and the other 5 are known only through textual descriptions. So we actually have a pretty good sense of what the corpus looks like. But because it's only 20 out of 196, this is by far the minority of human figures. It's about 10% of the total number of human figures. So very, very small number. If we look at where they were found, at first glance it might seem that they are clustering in certain areas. But this is really due more to the accident of preservation. This part of the city was excavated very early, and at that period, archaeologists weren't particularly interested in recording drawings or graffiti at all, right? So we should assume that there would be drawings of women in this area as well. The drawings that we find in the more recently excavated areas are found on the insides and outsides of buildings. They're found in houses, in shops, in public buildings, even in a bath, and a tomb down here as well. In almost every case, they are singletons, and by that I mean they are the only drawing of a woman that's found in a particular house. There's a couple of notable exceptions, and I'll talk about those later. But this single status is really different from what we find with drawings of men. So there are several instances where you have multiple drawings of men in a single space. Like on the outside of this house here, we have 11 drawings of male profiles. It seems as though somebody was practicing making this particular figure and did it over and over and over and over again while they were standing outside waiting to meet the house's owner. But we don't have this kind of practicing with women. The other thing that we don't have is we don't find drawings of women in places where we know that they were meeting and hanging out together. For instance, in the purpose-built brothel, and also in the House of the Four Styles. Now, the House of the Four Styles is really interesting because in that room back there, Rebecca Benefiel found 14 textual graffiti, textual inscriptions that were written by and directed to women. So it seems as though these women were kind of writing back and forth to each other, maybe dining together or hanging out together and writing. But we don't have any drawings of anything from the house there. So that's also kind of unique. So very few of them, not what we would expect to see. And the other thing that is not how we would expect it is how these drawings look, right? And by that I mean the style in which they're drawn and the features that the drawers choose to include in the drawings themselves. So as I turn to look at the formal qualities of these drawings, I want to take a little side tour through some contemporary research on drawing that I think will be helpful. So, there have been studies done on the influence of the ambient visual culture on people's conceptions of the world or perceptions of the world and how that influences what they draw. So art educators and cognitive psychologists have found out that the visual culture around us, popular culture, elite culture, the visual world around us influences us to the degree that when we are asked to draw something, we oftentimes default to the styles of the dominant visual culture. And one of the best examples of this is the influence that manga and anime, which are Japanese comic book styles, have on the drawings that are made by Japanese children. So when Japanese children are asked to draw a figure, they, completely unprompted, will oftentimes echo one of these major anime genres, the doll genre, the animal genre, and the mecha genre, right? And this is not just children who do this, because there have been studies that show that also that college students do this as well. So it's not just the kids, right? So these drawings, they look like the characters, they are the characters, but they also, with the costumes and so forth, but they also have the style, the large eyes, the little half-moon mouths, and so forth, okay? And we can see the same sort of absorption of the cultural, the visual idiom when we look at drawings of men from Pompeii. And the drawers here have absorbed some of the dominant styles and costumes and so forth. So we see a man in a toga, which is the costume of the elite Roman male. It's the costume par excellence. Somebody draws the image of a man and gives him a laurel wreath, like here, which is a symbol of victory and also of esteem. Or someone draws a gladiator and they replicate not only the arms and the armor, but also the pose that is found, that's typical of gladiators in other media. when we look at women, this is absolutely not the case, not at all. These are 3 objects here in the collection of the VMFA, and you can see these 2 portraits of Agrippina, the younger and the elder. Both were made at about the same time, that right a little bit before Pompeii was destroyed. The Fayum portrait is later, but it still it retains these culturally valued details. So Roman women shown in portraiture and in painting and in sort of elite official media have to, or generally have, very regular, idealized faces. They have hair that's beautifully coiffed but not out of control, and they oftentimes are wearing really beautiful jewelry. Now, when we look at the drawings of women, we really don't see that at all. Well, we sort of do. This is a really great comparison. This is the portrait of Sagania, and you can see that actually this portrait, or this drawing, does replicate some of the details that we find in the portrait of Agrippina the Elder. She's got the hair pulled up. She has this very regular kind of sweet face. One of the things that's interesting about this is a very ambitious drawing. It's about 18 inches tall, and the artist is using some techniques that shows that they're really trying, they're hatching, and they're using contour lines and so forth. This was found in a tomb, and one of the scholars believe, or some scholars believe, that it may actually be a drawing from life of a funerary portrait, so a stone portrait that would be similar to what we see on the left of the portrait of Agrippina the Elder. But that's pretty unique. In many cases, it's only the female name, the woman's name, that helps us identify this as the image of a woman in the first place, right? So it's pretty obvious to me that that Pompeii's drawers, for the most part, weren't interested in drawing women, or there was a gap there. They weren't so excited about drawing women, and when they did draw women, they were not deeply influenced by kind of the dominant visual markers, hallmarks of female portraiture. So the ordinary person on the street isn't absorbing all of these, all of the things that we think are typical of ancient Roman female portraiture. It's kind of interesting. However, it's these gaps that I think make these drawings worth pushing a little bit further. So I'm going to turn to look at them in their original contexts. All right. So these are rare. Very, very few of these images of women were made. And I think that the rarity of them would have made them eye-catching. But there are some other techniques or some other aspects of them that also made them really eye-catching. And the first one is the location that many of them were drawn, the location in which many of them were drawn. So we've already seen Fortunata, right here on the top, centered over this incredibly exotic mirror, obsidian mirror, very eye-catching. But this isn't the only example of placement being an association with something that's kind of luxurious or elite, being connected with women, drawings of women. We also find it with the drawing of a woman named Nigra, whose profile was appended to a large announcement for games that were given by a very prominent Pompeian, probably the most prominent Pompeian of his day, Gnaeus Alaeus Nigidius Maius. So this announcement is painted on a facade of a building. It was painted by a man named Augustales, who signs the dipinto in the O, right? So Augustales gets all of the formal information. He's a professional sign painter. He gets everything that he's commissioned to paint in there. Who is, why we're having these games, who's putting them on, what you can expect when you get there. This is going to be a big, big deal, a big, big day, right? And then at the end, he writes, Nigra vale, which means, Nigra, be well. Right? It's like, hey, ciao, right? So, and it's just right here. It's incredibly difficult to see. Right? Now, this is really interesting. There are other examples of these kinds of chatty announcements and other of these official dipinti that have little asides to people, and some of them show portraits and things. But there are only two that salute women. This is one of them. And there's only one, this one, that actually not only salutes her with a textual message, but also with a portrait or a little sketch. So Augustales was pretty cool. So this is the reconstruction of the facade that the dipinto that the announcement was painted on. Here is its location, right here on the corner. And so as you walked along this sidewalk, and here's an archival photograph of it to give you a better sense. So you can see that there are a number of other election slogans and election announcements and other things painted on the facade. So as you walked along the sidewalk, you would literally be looking up and saying, oh, wow, look at that there's going to be this great games, and oh my gosh, Gnaeus Alaeus Nigidius Maius, he's awesome, I'm so excited, and then you're like, wow, I wonder what's up with her, like, it's just, she is elevated, she is associated with one of the biggest sporting events of the season. Obviously, there were 4 other announcements for the same games all over through Pompeii, and associated with Gnaeus Alaeus Nigidius Maius, this really ritzy person. And we don't know why Augustales did this, why he wanted to salute this otherwise ordinary person, but he added this in. It would be like if you were driving down the road and you saw a billboard that said, the Super Bowl brought to you by Bill Gates, and then someone's like, hey, Peg, Really, literally. And everybody else who's driving along is going like, wow, I wonder who Peg is. Wow, what's she doing up there? That's so incredible. That's some visibility. That's really some visibility. Hyria also is in a very visible place. Her portrait here is drawn on the inside of a column that surrounded a little garden, a subterranean garden. As you came down the stairs right here, you would see her face right there, right at about eye level. As you walked from one wing of the peristyle to the other, you would see her face, and because she is faced towards you, she is frontally facing, kind of like a Mona Lisa effect. Her eyes might catch you as you walked by, and because of this column, you would be able to, she'd kind of track on you, right? So not only is she given a prominent location, but she's also frontally facing you to capture your attention. Her eyes meet yours. And this frontal position is something that we see with a number of the other drawings of women, this frontal, front-facing pose. There are 9 other drawings of women, 3 of which we only know through descriptions, that show women facing forward. And that's like 45% of the drawings. And what's extraordinary is out of the 176 drawings of men, only 4 of them are shown facing forward. Right? So there's something going on with women facing forward, looking at you. So let's think about that. To understand this, we need to think about the Gorgon Medusa. Okay? So as I'm sure most of you know, Medusa was cursed by Minerva, and the result of this curse is that she became incredibly ugly, and she had hair that turned into snakes. She was so ugly that when you looked at her, you froze into stone. Perseus, the hero, beheaded her, and he used her head, her decapitated head, as a weapon, literally, to petrify his enemies, right? And here you see Perseus holding aloft the head of Medusa. Now, these two images of Medusa begin to suggest that the Romans had a particular way of showing this goddess. They had a particular set of features that she should have. Okay. So Medusa, a really good Roman Medusa, is going to be moon-faced. She's going to have big eyes and eyebrows that are just like these kind of lamplight eyes and eyebrows. She has wings coming off of her forehead, snakes in her hair, and oftentimes she ties two of these snakes under her chin into a knot, which is what you're seeing right here, right? And the two drawings that survive of this character, Medusa, show these traits: wings, snakes underneath, big face facing forward, big staring eyes. And the other drawings that we know, the descriptions of the other drawings that do not survive, suggest that they also had these kinds of features. So there are 5 drawings of Medusa that we know about, right? And that makes her the most popular female image for Pompeii's drawers to render. But she was popular all over the place, quite frankly, because Medusa, this horrible visage, the Romans believed that this horrible face could ward away the evil eye and protect you. So perhaps that was why the owners of the rings in the VMFA that show Medusa purchased them to protect themselves. In Pompeii, we find Medusa in the backs of shrines, shown in mosaics, and this fruit seller, this is not the real guy, he's a reconstructor. He had Medusa painted twice on the counter of his store. Both of them have sadly deteriorated, and I show you the locations, their original locations, right? But all of these images are made by professionals, right? Professional painters, professional gem cutters, professional mosaicists. What we see with the drawings are ordinary people saying, I want the power of Medusa, and I know exactly where I want it. It's not there yet, but I'm going to put it where I want it. In the Stabian Baths, we see this really clearly. Stabian Baths are right at the corner of the 2 main streets in Pompeii, so it's in the center of the city. And somebody or some bodies drew 4 of the 5 Gorgon Medusas in this bath building. I'll show you on a map in a second, but they were on the wall back here, and then up in this section, up at the top of the building. So 2 of them we know 3 of them from descriptions, and 2 of those descriptions are pretty vague about where they actually were. They just say that they were somewhere on the wall here in between these 2 doorways. So these are conjectural, but somewhere along this wall we have 2 Medusas. We know that another Medusa here that's also lost was drawn on the inside of the column that star is covering up. And then the 4th Medusa is drawn right here, and We have already seen her right there. Oh, let me go back here, because one of the things that's interesting is that this doorway leads into a passage which goes up into a changing room and the cold plunge pool for the women's section of the baths, which is shown in green. So this is all the women's section of the bath. So this is that doorway into the women's section of the bath. Here is that little figure of Medusa right there. And we know from the descriptions that these drawings are all really similar to each other, and they all have an animal associated with them. And so it seems as though they're done by the same person or by a group of people who are kind of riffing on the same theme and maybe building on this group of images. So Medusa isn't actually that uncommon in baths, despite what you see here. This is a 19th century painting, but for the Romans, baths were actually pretty scary places because you were vulnerable to physical problems. You could slip on the floor, or you could pick up an infection, or somebody could steal your clothes. That actually happened. And then also, the Romans believed that these hot, dark places were kind of infernal spots or had infernal elements to them. And so you were vulnerable to envy or demons or attacks from vulnerable to the evil eye. And it's on thresholds like this where you change spaces and states that you're particularly vulnerable and you need some extra protection. So throughout the Roman Empire, we find apotropaic images. These are images meant to thwart the evil eye and to protect the people inside the bath. We find them at doorways and on important thresholds. We find figures like Medusa. We find magical animals. We find phalluses, and we find ichthyphallic figures in these spaces that need extra protection. But at Pompeii, in the Stabian Baths, we do not have any mosaics showing apotropaic figures. And so it seems to me that some body or bodies said, we need something right here. We need something right here. We need some protection in this area. As you walk up, you would see these series of Medusas, and it makes sense in a lot of ways. This is an area where women in particular were vulnerable as you took off your clothes and prepared to bathe. You were particularly vulnerable. And it makes really good sense to put the image of a woman who turns men to stone right at the doorway, right? It's so specific that I'm tempted to attribute these drawings to women, but we honestly can't say that for sure. What we can say is that some people or a person wanted to claim the power of the Gorgon for themselves in this particular space. Now, this power of the frontal-facing female image is important, especially for an audience of ancient Pompeians who are primed to see front-facing, yikes, that's Medusa, right? And so most of the other frontal-facing female figures, I think, pick up on this type of power, the power of the Gorgon's gaze. One of them actually is a Medusa, and it was drawn on one of the columns in a large, in the colonnade that surrounded a large exercise area called the Palestra. Sort of like Hyria, she's drawn onto a column. She's actually on the inside of the column in the walkway on the south side of the building. And so as you approached her, she would catch your gaze and maybe protect you, maybe maybe strike you down. We don't know. The figure of Roma also was drawn onto a transitional space. It was drawn in a fairly small house, inside a small house, put onto a wall that divided a doorway into a day room and a stairway that led up to the second floor. And like Medusa, this personification of the imperial capital may have served to protect people passing from one space in the house to another. And finally, our mortal friend Fortunata was drawn somewhere on this wall. We don't know exactly where, we just know she was drawn on the wall. And it may not be a coincidence that this is the same shop that had the two Medusas drawn or painted onto the front of the counter. Perhaps the person who drew Fortunata was inspired by one of the two or both of the Gorgons at the front of the shop. And we don't know whether Fortunata is shown as in the guise of a Gorgon for positive reasons, saying that she's a very powerful personality or person, or whether there was something about her that was a little bit scary. We really can't tell what the motivations are. However, I think it's really interesting that so many of these women face forward. Okay, so this evening we have seen, I hope I've shown you, how these drawings can provide really unique insights into the ancient world. We've seen that the Pompeians who chose to draw often chose not to draw women, and when they did draw women, chose to show them in ways that were unusual or didn't accord with the dominant visual idiom of Pompeii or the Roman Empire. So there's this kind of profound absence of women, in a way, in the Roman or in the Pompeian visual imagination. However, when they were drawn, they were pretty special. They were placed in these incredibly eye-catching locations and oftentimes posed to greet the viewer face on. And they could be used by their drawers to protect themselves, to protect spaces, and to suggest attitudes or to suggest personalities of the characters who were drawn. So I hope you've seen that there are some really interesting insights that we can gain from these ancient drawings, and I hope I've shown you how ancient drawings can really help us to new understandings of Pompeii's women and their role in society. So thank you.